going to start to complicate our reading of Mercury and the situation that Prometheus is in with the Furies and Mercury. Here we're going to look at a video without me, with the Penn Shelley Seminar Group being led by our administrative coordinator, Dan, and he is going to lead them, and especially Kelly Lincoln, in a back and forth about what the possibilities are for this character and how our situation in our own lives relates to the situation of Mercury. Please do enjoy this video.
So today we're looking at Act 1, lines 330 through 520. And I thought we'd get started by having a group read-through so we can hear the lines aloud, kind of get into the rhythms and the cadences that Shelley's employing here, which are so important to this lyrical drama. And then from there we can have maybe a broader discussion of what's happening narratively and then some of the themes that he's beginning to work in here towards the end of Act 1. So what's happening here? And I guess we can start with just the most basic sense. What's the narrative that is happening here? What is Prometheus talking about with the Furies and Mercury? How's he playing? Does anyone have any thoughts?
I like what Eric says, that Mercury's kind of the enforcer, the oh, I don't want to have to hurt you, but he's making me do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get what he's saying, but I don't really see. I personally, and Eric and I, don't see eye to eye in a lot of this, simply because I see it more in a theatrical context rather than a literary context. So I'm coming at it from a different point. What I see with Mercury is that Mercury is offering Prometheus one last chance to redeem himself by telling Jove what he needs to know. Because all of his lines is, I don't want to do it. Again, it is, I don't want to do this. Mm-hmm. But unlike an enforcer, the enforcer wouldn't have any pity about it. I don't want to do it, but I gotta do what I gotta do. Yeah, I gotta call, I gotta get, he's really not the enforcer, he's just the messenger. Yeah. I'm telling you, I don't want to have to break your legs, but if you don't pay me up, I'm going to have to get my friend Bruno here and Putin to break your legs. But he's the one offering the way out. Mm-hmm. He's the good cop to Jove's bad cop. Yeah, is how I see it.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Because he brings up the fact that it's all about that one thing. It's not about the tricks that Prometheus had played on Jove in the past. It's not about the fire. It's about how long he is going to remain in power. It's a very Machiavellian action in the real understanding of Machiavelli, which is Jove's the evil prince. Prometheus is the good prince. One stands by his ethics, the other does not. So who's going to fall under their own way?
Yeah, I like that binary setup, because then I think maybe to come between you and Eric on this, I think I read Mercury as very much like the reluctant enforcer, if that's the word we're going to use. But it's interesting to think about him as kind of he's a product of the institution, right? He's there, and he seems to be not on his own will wanting to punish.
He's not. He is psychopomp. Mercury is the herald of the gods, but he's also the psychopomp who leads the dead souls into Elysium.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a very interesting position, particularly for Shelley to comment on, because, we've been talking about the French Revolution and all that's happening in England at this time. And so Shelley, as ardent and radical as he is with his politics, I think it's important to remember, too, that he's writing from Italy. He's kind of in this safe place, relatively speaking, removed from the action. And he's not necessarily in a position that someone like Mercury's in, right? Maybe a biographical or historical stand-in for Mercury would be someone like Leigh Hunt, or one of these people who's still back and is still under the oppressive government and is getting jailed for publishing certain things and
And in that regard, Shelley, if you want to put Shelley in the place of Mercury, in my opinion, Shelley is the psychopomp.
Okay.
With his commentary. If we look at Prometheus as the weight of what England can be, as opposed to what it is. And Psychopomp Mercury is saying, I have no choice but to lead these hell-being creatures, these demons and whatever, since in the Greek mythology and the Roman mythology there was no real separation of heaven and hell. Elysium was on the same plane as the underworld, and the demons were wherever they wanted to be. So he leads the demons up, just as he would lead Prometheus as the psychopomp up to Jove to say for forgiveness. So he's got that. So he's just really saying, this is what's happening.
Yeah, he's complicit in this thing that he doesn't necessarily support, right? Which I think we can all sympathize with too, right? I mean, it's easy to call for change. It's harder to enact it, right? We're all kind of products of, or we're all held to the institutions that we want to be held to, right?
And in this regard, with this one last plea to compromise, for Prometheus to compromise his ethics, it's the final test of the will of the new England.
Yes, yeah. Prometheus is idealism unbridled, and Mercury is a pragmatist, essentially, right?
I don't know if I would call him in the scene pragmatic. I would say probably, because there's no assurance, because, everybody knows, just because, he's saying this will happen doesn't mean it will. We all know that tyranny does not reward quizzling or waffling or going back on you or compromising. What would have happened, and Prometheus knows what will happen to him if he does give Jupiter what he wants, which is omniscience. Right now, Jupiter is all powerful, but without that one thing, knowing when his reign will come to an end, means he is not omniscient, which means he cannot control his own fate. He is so. In that regards, Prometheus is Jupiter's Ariadne. Okay. He knows how long what the web and the string of Jove's reign and life will be. He's got that power, and that's what keeps. It's the only thing that is keeping Jupiter from actually doing to Prometheus what he did to all of the other Titans, with the exception of Gaia, Earth, and Neptune, Ocean.
What is going on here? What's happening in the narrative at this point in the poem?
So the Furies are coming to wreak havoc on Prometheus, but before we can get to that, Mercury comes in to kind of try and broker a deal with him, in essence, offers him a plea bargain or something akin to that.
So, the Furies come first, right? Furies come first? Or they're all on scene together?
I envision it as they're en route, and the Furies are anxious to get to Prometheus, and Mercury kind of pauses them and says, okay, hold on a sec, I need to talk to him first, and they're kind of waiting in the wings, kind of champing at the bit, as it were. And then you have the dialogue with Mercury and Prometheus.
Okay, so here in these lines, Mercury says, back to your towers of iron, and gnash beside the streams of fire, and wail your foodless teeth. So who is he speaking to? Is he speaking to the Furies here?
Yeah, that's how I took it. That's how I took it.
And so we get some names here, right? We get Geryon, Gorgon, Chimera, and Sphinx.
If I could add, I think my understanding also is that while the Furies are at the fore, that there's a great deal of monsters.
Okay, so let's try to explain that. Okay, right. Satya, go ahead. Why?
Only that. I mean that that's my reading of this anyway. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like these three Furies, in particular, are in given speaking lines, but it reads as if the Furies are a legion. And furthermore, there are descriptions of there being all these other monsters called up, such as Sphinx and such as Geryon the giant and the Gorgon and Shamira and the Sphinx. I mean, these are
There's more names than we have voices. So we're maybe thinking that we're going to use the chorus, and this is a time for the chorus to put on their mask of monstrosity, and we could have maybe the chorus doing a monstrous dance or something like this. I mean, a lot of this is our imaginative capacity to say, you know, what could we do with the text here? So that's certainly a possibility. So who do we get a sense are the Furies, and who do we get a sense is Mercury? Stephanie, what do you think?
I'm not sure about the Furies, but I got a sense of Mercury as kind of a puppet of Jupiter, and he seemed to be saying that he had sympathy for Prometheus, and that he understood the phoniness of heaven, but he just wasn't brave enough to just take Prometheus's side completely, and he was really just following orders.
Okay, so here we go. So Prometheus, and by the way, I just have to say, it's important, even though we have lots of recording devices, all of us have to project a little bit. So, I think what you said is important. Mercury doesn't like, or he seems not to like doing his job, but he has to do it. He's taken the coin, right, of Mercury, okay? And he's kind of expressing almost a kind of, maybe almost a good cop to the Furies' bad cop. Does that make sense?
Sure, sure.
But the question then is what we can do with the language to play with it. Because I kind of get the sense that Mercury, his good cop is pretty shallow. He's sort of saying, I don't want to have to break both your legs. I don't want to really have to, you know, crack each of your fingers. I don't want to have to bludgeon you with a hammer, but I will do that. And I really wish you would just make my life easier, because I only have to crack 2 of your fingers. So,
Eric, do you think it's that strong? I felt more sympathetic to Mercury as something he has to do. He really doesn't totally want to do. And I guess he has to do it just because it's the chief god telling him to do it.
right. So I think there's definitely different ways to play this character.
Right.
You can play it like a Mercury who enjoys his job a little too much.
Right.
Or you could play it like a Mercury who's literally just saying, well, you know, look, I'm the messenger.
Right.
I'm responsible for communication, and I'm the fleetest of foot, and I'm here to give the word to you, so you know what the boss says.
Right.
And I'm totally impartial. I'm just doing, as Stephanie said, just doing my job. But of course, that does make us think of Nuremberg. It makes us think of the Nazis in Nuremberg.
Right. I don't think he's totally impartial. I think he has some feelings about this
I do
himself, but
too.
he's just not brave enough to
Right.
really act on them.
So let's find it in the text. Where in the text can we find something that shows some real sympathy that Mercury might have?
I'd say the speech around line.
So read a couple of
359.
lines. Pick a couple of lines.
Mercury says to the Furies, crouch then in silence. Then he turns to Prometheus and refers to him as awful sufferer. And of course, I guess readers, the people who listen to the MOOC will know that the word awful has a totally different meaning in our speech than it did then. Awful is something you're in awe of. It's not something that's bad.
Not necessarily, right. Absolutely.
Right. But that he basically says, wise art thou. Mercury says to Prometheus, wise art thou, firm and good, but vainly wouldst stand forth alone in strife against the omnipotent. I feel maybe that Mercury feels like Prometheus' suffering would be over if Prometheus just gives over the secret. But because Prometheus is withholding the secret, he's causing his own suffering. So I guess my feeling was that Mercury is saying, I don't want to see you suffer. You are a good soul. Just
do what the boss says.
yes, give over the secret, and we can all not have to see you going through this.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a great deal of humanity in Mercury's like complicity to this larger thing that he
I think so.
disagrees
too.
with. I think especially, I mean, we part of why we love Shelley, right, is his radical and very ardent politics. But I think, at least to myself, there's a lot more Mercury, right? Like I have these political ideals that are sometimes difficult to realize, and I need to pay my rent, and I'm sure Mercury does as well. And so you become complicit in maybe in a system that you don't agree with. And I would like to be more Promethean in my life, but I think I sympathize with Mercury more for his plight.
It makes him a more complicated character too.
So I think there's certainly a way of seeing our own position in the ordinary world as that of Mercury, that we are, as long as we allow the systems that we live in to stand, we are all given the message to pass on, and the message is that of power over powerlessness, of force over suffering, and we have to agree to be Mercury.
And even, I guess, in Shelley's context, the older generation of the Romantics and the Lake poets maybe fill-ins for Mercury, right? The Wordsworths, the Southies, who were kind of not as, or they lost faith in the cause more so than Shelley, right? So I think Shelley kind of was unwilling and unbending in his belief in the cause or the ideals of the revolution, whereas you see these older poets kind of maybe conforming to the system. They all become the poet. They're Wordsworth, Southey. They all become the poet laureate of England, and kind of Shelley was never that, right? He never towed the company line, as it were, and so
Southey, still maintained a great friendship for Shelley. The young Shelley came to stay with Southey when he was 17, but I think the complicity with power that Shelley sensed in Southey, because he really liked him very much.
yeah, there's those great letters where he has like that turn within like a week almost, where he writes these beautiful things about Southey, and then like a week later he says like,
But
yeah, there's that.
and he's writing for these conservative magazines. So we should feel that Mercury has something of perhaps of Southey in him. But I want to suggest to you that what happens when you play the role of Mercury long enough, and this after all is 3,000 years, and we know how much Prometheus has changed in 3,000 years, and we've just literally had to give credence to that.
Mhm.
So I want you to be able to imagine the validity of a Mercury who has changed so much by being steeped in evil, that he becomes not the neutral figure that we know, but a figure who carries with him something of the malice, of the awfulness, of the taskmaster whose task he carries out. And so I would read the lines like this. Wise art thou, firm and good, but vainly would stand forth alone in strife against the omnipotent, as yon clear lamps that measure and divide the weary years, from which there is no refuge, long have taught, and long must teach. Even now thy torturer arms with the strange might of unimagined pains, the powers which scheme slow agonies in hell, and my commission is to lead them here. Or what more subtle, foul, or savage fiends people the abyss, and leave them to their task. And so what he's there to do, by saying the lines in those ways, is to pull any sense that Prometheus might have into just total submission. And I think Shelley probably gives us enough play with those lines to imagine a Mercury in more than one way. I'm overly influenced perhaps by many years of procedurals on television with good cops and bad cops.
Yes.